Hello, BookTube. This is Weekly Reads. Surprising no one, my reading week once again can be divided into two. A great weekend where I read manga and a work week in which I didn't. So I started my reading week with 3 volumes of Dr. Stone by Riichiro, Inagaki, and Boichi. Volumes 10, 11, and 12. Dr. Stone is set 3,700 years from now. In the later 2010s, a mysterious event occurs in which the entire human population on Earth is petrified, leaving only the astronauts on the International Space Station to be not petrified. 3,700 years later, a brilliant high schooler named Senku becomes depetrified. And he sets about understanding what happened, his new reality, and how to depetrify others. Shortly thereafter, a classmate of his, Taiju, is depetrified, and that's where the story begins, is with Taiju's depetrification. The two decide to release a young man named Tsukasa, who was famous at the time for being an incredibly tough and strong young man who is famous for being a fighter. And in a world in which there are now lions prowling what once was Tokyo, you kind of need somebody like Tsukasa. And then the fourth person to be depetrified is the third member of the Senku Taiju Yuzuriha friendship group, Yuzuriha. Unfortunately, this sort of foursome breakup, because Senku and Tsukasa have very different ideas on how to proceed. Senku wants to restore the world to what it once was when they were petrified. And Tsukasa wants to create a whole new world. And to create that new world, the only people who should be depetrified are the young, who have no attachment to the world that was. Also, Tsukasa has some trauma with older people, so it's a lot of his animus towards them. So there's a violent clash, and Senku leaves. And he stumbles upon the descendants of the crew of the International Space Station. Part of their descendants live on the main island of Japan, and others live on an island off the coast. And so Senku joins this tribe and forms the Kingdom of Science. For much of the series to Volume 10, Senku uses his scientific know-how to improve the lives of the village, as well as to prepare for a conflict with Tsukasa, who has formed the Empire of Might. That conflict ends early in Volume 10, when the Empire of Might joins the Kingdom of Science, and Tsukasa is fatally wounded, which begins the next big phase of the series, where Senku looks to figure out how to understand the petrification effect and how to replicate it so that Tsukasa can be healed of his fatal wound. In addition to petrifying, the petrification process is also restorative. It is healing. So the next big thing for the United Kingdom of Science and Empire of Might is to build a research ship, which calls for the presence of somebody who knows something about ships. And so this introduces a hilarious character called Ryusi. Yeah, Ryusui, who is the scion of a major corporation in the old world who has a fondness for sailing ships. So on the cover, this is Senku and this is Ryusui. So he joins the group, and not only does his presence introduce shipbuilding, but also the beginnings of capitalism, because he is an incredibly greedy young man. And so much of volumes 10, 11, and 12 is devoted to the various scientific pursuits that need to go into building a research vessel, and also the beginnings of agriculture. And I loved these chapters. They were amazing. And I really enjoyed the integration of the Kingdom of Science and the Empire of Might. These 3 volumes end with the introduction of the other descendants of the International Space Station who live on an island off the coast of Japan. These individuals are under the rule of a despotic leader who does have access to whatever it was that causes petrification. And I'm really looking forward to what comes next. So let's look at some pictures from volume. Volume 10. So it's and I love Boichi's artwork. He is amazing. Just amazing. So on Saturday and Sunday, I read 6 volumes of One Piece by Eiichiro Oda, volumes 64 through 69. Excuse me. So One Piece is one of the most popular manga series there is, and also one of the longer running series. One Piece is about a young man named Monkey D. Luffy, who, when he was a child, was the mascot of a pirate crew captained by red-haired Shanks. On the penultimate visit of this pirate crew to Luffy's home village, Luffy ate a devil fruit, a fruit that, if you consume it, grants its consumer supernatural abilities. In Luffy's case, he is granted elastic powers. Think Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four. However, the cost of eating a devil fruit is that you are no longer able to swim. And that's fairly difficult if you're a wannabe pirate. 10 years later, Luffy sets out on his own to become a pirate and build a crew so that he can go in search of the One Piece, a fabled treasure that will allow him to claim the title King of the Pirates. Over the course of Luffy's adventures, he builds a crew that quickly become a family. So these volumes cover 2 story arcs: Fishman Island and Punk Hazard. So Luffy and the crew have come to Fishman Island to get to the New World. In the One Piece setting, there are two major features. The Grand Line, which is basically think of it as sort of the equatorial zone between the tropics that is sort of bounded by calm zones where there are no winds or anything. It's very difficult for ships to cross. And then running perpendicular to the Grand Line is the Red Line, a sort of a thin strip of a supercontinent that rings the entire planet. This divides the world into 4 oceans. The East Blue, where One Piece begins, it's the homeland of most of the Straw Hat crew. And the East Blue, the West, the East Blue, the West Blue, the North Blue, and the South Blue. And so basically, if you're wanting to travel to the Grand Line, you have to go to one part of the Red Line where Reverse Mountain is, which is a mountain that has channels dug into it where you can go through and then enter into, like, climb up the Red Line and then take a channel into the Grand Line. The Grand Line itself is divided into 2 parts. Paradise, where once the Straw Hats leave the East Blue, is where they are for much of the first part of the series, and culminates in the Paramount War. And there's a 2-year time skip before the Straw Hats enter the New World, which is the other half of the Grand Line. And to enter the New World, you have to take one of 2 routes. Either you go to Marijoya, the capital of the world, and basically take a elevator up to Marijoya at the top of the Red Line, and then pass through, and then buy a ship at a port on the other side. This is the official way. And since pirates are not official, they can have to take a second route, which is through Fishman Island, which is located directly below Marijoya in the ocean. And where Fishman Island is located, there is also a subterranean cavern where, which is the unofficial method of getting into the New World. So the Straw Hats come to Fishman Island to cross over into the New World. And while they're there, they get involved in civil strife. A new generation of pirates inspired by Arlong, who was the major antagonist of One Piece for the first 12 volumes, have begun insurrectionary action against the ruling family of Fishman Island. And during the Straw Hats' stay, there is a rebellion led by Hody Jones, the captain of the New Arlong Pirates. And the Straw Hats get involved to defeat these fisherman supremacist pirates, and it is amazing. I really enjoyed the Fishman Island arc, both what I've already read and the conclusion in these first 3 volumes, 64 through 66. It is amazing. Particularly the showing of the Straw Hats. Luffy's character, he is amazing in this. There's a chapter called 10 versus 100,000, and it's amazing. And also the introduction of Big Mom, who will become a major antagonist later on in the series. Her confrontation with Luffy was just amazing. The so once the Straw Hats enter into the New World, they stumble upon the island of Punk Hazard, which is half a molten hellscape and half a frozen hellscape. Punk Hazard was originally a research station for the world government, or researching advanced weaponry. An incident occurred that led to the evacuation of the island. However, during the time skip, the island was selected to be the location of a duel between two Marine admirals competing for the position of Fleet Admiral. At the end of the Paramount War, at the end of the pre-time skip, One Piece, the Fleet Admiral Sengoku resigned and recommended Aokiji to be his successor. However, others in the world government preferred Akainu. And so Aokiji, who I think had it been Kizaru or someone else, he wouldn't have wanted to become Fleet Admiral as badly as he would to prevent Akainu from becoming Fleet Admiral. So they fought. In the end, Akainu won and was elevated to become Fleet Admiral Sakazuki. Aokiji, refusing to serve under Akainu, Sakazuki leaves and goes independent. Although, as of these volumes, what exactly he's doing is still left up in the air. So, in the aftermath of this duel, a renegade scientist who was part of the original research team on Punk Hazard named Caesar Clown has taken up residence. And he is kidnapping children for experimentation, as well as pirates. And that's when the Straw Hats stumble upon Punk Hazard and go to investigate because they receive a distress signal. Also receiving a distress signal is a marine ship commanded by now Vice Admiral Smoker. So this leads to a very tense quasi-alliance between the two groups to figure out what exactly Caesar is up to. And also involves one of the 7 warlords of the sea, Trafalgar Law, who was, during the Paramount War, an ally of Luffy. So this Punk Hazard arc has been a lot of fun. I really have enjoyed every moment I spent with it. And I'm really looking forward to returning to Punk Hazard and to continue on with One Piece. It is just, I'm having a ball. And I will be reading 6 more volumes this weekend for sure. So, there. Man, this is awesome. Where all of the Straw Hats and their allies confront the new Arlong pirates. Just so much fun. Okay, now on to the disappointment. Inventing the Renaissance by Ada Palmer. So, Inventing the Renaissance is a rather unique history of the period that lasted roughly from 1250 CE or AD, however you want to put those letters at the end of that date, to 1700. I picked this book up a few months ago. from the University of Chicago Press because they had a 30% off on the book, and I'd heard some good things about it. So I picked it up, and shortly after I picked it up, I dipped into it for a first reading attempt. And I bailed in the first chapter introduction, which was about Machiavelli, who is sort of something of a guide, a ghost haunting this history. I think initially I wasn't all that fond of Palmer's style for this. And so I set it aside. And a few weeks ago, I came back to it with an idea of maybe I could give it a Bell Redemption shot. I've been obsessing over trying to knock some of the Bells that I've had over the course of this year out of my Bell list and add them to my finished reads. And so things have been really off for me regarding both history and the part of my library that I call classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama. So I decided to give this another look, and I managed to get past that first chapter introduction and into the first part of the book, which is largely how the Renaissance was created. The idea of the Renaissance was created. And so over the course of this work week, I read more of that part and into the second part, which largely looks at elements of the earlier parts of the dates covered. And I wasn't enjoying the book. I was hoping that I might still persevere and finish it, but that did not turn out to be the case. I bailed on the book for the second time in the Studia Humanitatis, The Words That Sting and Bite, which is about basically tutoring that focuses largely on reading the classics and writing Latin to sort of emulate them, with a greater focus on sort of the verbal or the technical displays of literary or verbal, would be literary mastery of Latin. And I lost interest. That chapter and the chapter preceding it, the Humanistas' rival scholasticism, they didn't interest me. And so I decided I'm done. And I put this aside once again. So that's so much for inventing the Renaissance. So this coming reading week, I'm going to, over the course of the weekend, read 6 more volumes. So it would be volumes 70 through 75 of One Piece by Eiichiro Oda. And then over the course of the work week, Monday through Friday, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to pick something from these bookcases behind me, or maybe do a try chapter tag with some history to see if I want to begin culling that collection once I'm able to find a reliable way to unhaul books. I will, of course, report back on what I decide to do next weekly reads, which might be a later weekly reads, depending on how Friday turns out and what my reading is like over the course of the work week. Of course, also on Friday, there will be my November reading plans, which are still up in the air, except for I'm going to read the entirety of Naruto by Masashi Kishimoto. That is a certainty. Everything else, I'm not entirely sure, because there's my October manga haul coming in, and also possibly November's manga haul, so I need to figure that out. But I will decide that by next Friday. Also, I'm hoping to do some more videos, discussion videos. There should be at least manga haul hopefully next week. I put in an order with Barnes and Noble. 3 of the 7 books have come in, but the final 4 are taking a bit of time, and I'm not entirely sure why. And I'll complain about that when I do the haul. And I will also try to do some tag videos as well, because there is one tag video that I have been trying to do for a month now, and it is stymieing me still. So hopefully I will figure it out and be able to make an awesome tag video. But that's all I got for this week. I need to go ahead and sign off because a nurse should be coming by to visit my mother. So I'm going to be there for when she does. So until I see you next week, thank you, BookTube. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Have a great weekend. And until I see you hopefully on Monday, stay safe.